The story begins in a lush garden where nobles have gathered, and there, a girl with fiery red hair introduces herself as Verona Rosentin. Verona reveals the truth that she is living inside the events of a fantasy novel. The novel's plot is conventional, revolving around a saintly heroine who faces the forces of dark magic. But Verona explains that she is not the protagonist. Rather, the true heroine is another blonde-haired girl, appearing smiling in her wedding dress. Verona's role manifests as being the heroine's best friend and an ordinary secondary character in the novel, and the two appeared to be in perfect harmony. Thanks to her prior knowledge of all the story's events, Verona collaborated with the heroine and the hero to defeat evil, leading the novel to its happy ending, culminated by their wedding. Despite that cheerful conclusion, Verona reflects on her memories, admitting that the path was not easy at all. However, despite the hardships, she felt a sense of satisfaction and achievement in that life, appearing as she clapped happily at the wedding ceremony. Her life was supposed to end peacefully as she grew older, but something mysterious happened to change that expected fate. Suddenly, she found herself young again, looking at her reflection in the mirror in a state of shock, certain that she had already died, and wondering in confusion about what was happening. Without knowing the reason for her return in time, she was forced to live the same life again, and the idea of returning to the starting point after her death seemed impossible to her, as signs of shock and despair were etched on her face. She lamented her situation, for she had finished the story exactly as the novel dictated, yet here she was back at the beginning once more. As she stared at her reflected image, she wondered if there was another possible end to the story she thought had closed its final chapter. Thus began her third life, in which she took a different path, treating the heroine with coldness and cruelty. But this path led her only to death as a rebel. In her fourth attempt, she joined a black magic organization, and her fate was execution. In her fifth life, she succumbed to despair and became a wreck, dying alone without achieving anything noteworthy. This vicious cycle of death and rebirth continued repeatedly through her 6th, 10th, and 17th lives, each carrying a different form of suffering and despair. Now she finds herself in her 21st life, showing signs of exhaustion and depletion from the repetition of her painful fate. Sitting on her bed, weighed down by the endless cycles of her life, she secretly wished to be allowed eternal rest. In a scene reflecting her absolute despair, she committed suicide in hopes of salvation. Suddenly, the maid entered to tell her that dinner time had come. When the maid opened the door, she suffered a horrific shock seeing her mistress had hanged herself, and she screamed her name in terror. Verona realized that regardless of the choices she made or the outcomes she faced, she always returned to the starting point. Thus, she concluded that even ending her life by her own hand was not the solution, and in her 22nd life, she felt that nothing could surprise her anymore. While she was lost in thought before the mirror, her maid found her fallen on the floor and asked anxiously what she was doing. Verona gave a profound answer, carrying the bitterness of her experiences, saying that she was exchanging words with God. The maid innocently suggested that if she wished for that, she should go offer prayers at the temple. The mention of the temple sparked something within her, as she realized the day she returned to was no ordinary day. She suddenly remembered the horrific event supposed to take place on this specific day. A person named Dominic, committing a massacre in which he kills all the priests. This villain is Dominic Roxelierne, who was abused in the temple's orphanage, and as a result, he gained the power of dark magic and his soul was stolen. Verona recalls her past lives, confirming that Dominic was the villain every single time. In a moment of reflection, she wonders about the inevitable reason that always makes him the villain, and a new idea occurs to her. What if she could prevent him from becoming a villain in the first place? She admitted it was a method she had never tried before, but doubts clouded her mind about the possibility of actually changing the course of events if she took this action. Despite her hesitation, she made up her mind and decided to try, realizing she had nothing left to lose. Without hesitation, she ordered her maid, Rose, to prepare a carriage immediately to head to the temple, her new destination toward changing fate. Upon her arrival, she slipped inside at the perfect timing to find Dominic there, feeling that her arrival at this moment was predestined. She saw his familiar shadow and black hair, realizing he was the type of person who cannot be forgotten once seen. She confronted him, and he revealed his distinctive red eyes, sharply asking her about her identity. She answered him calmly and confidently that she was someone who could provide him with information he did not yet know, noting that their meeting this way was the first of its kind, despite her previous knowledge of him. He looked at her with a skeptical gaze, wondering why he should believe her words, but she was not affected by his lukewarm response. Instead, she commented that his reaction was completely expected. She knew she held a secret known only to him, and that if she used that ring as evidence, she would at least be able to spark his interest. Indeed, she seemed confident in her ability to catch his attention as they stood in the temple lobby. She called him by his name directly and revealed to him that she knew his secret, which greatly surprised him that she knew both his name and his secret together. In an angry reaction, he grabbed her firmly and pulled her close, demanding she reveal this secret she spoke of. Then he increased his pressure, bringing his face close to hers, and ordered her in a threatening tone to tell him everything immediately. Despite the tense situation, she maintained her composure and smiled, commenting on his lack of patience. Then she dropped her bombshell, revealing to him his greatest secret, that he descends from a royal lineage. Dominic received her words with mockery and disdain, refusing to believe such a claim, while Verona thought it was fine to twist the facts slightly to achieve her goal. When he tried to refute her words by saying his mother was a commoner and asked if she claimed prophecy, she told him she had seen the future. To prove her sincerity, she asked him about the blue sapphire ring he possessed, which shocked him deeply. He wondered in amazement how she knew about the ring, so she in turn asked him if he believed her even a little now. Then she explained to him that the ring he inherited from his mother was not just a memento, but a piece only princesses were allowed to own. She revealed the full truth, that his mother was Princess Olivia, who married the Duke of Roxelier. Dominic's being was shaken by this truth, and he remembered the Emperor's words that he would not abandon his lineage. Wondering in pain why the Emperor had abandoned him, his pain turned into a raging anger, and he shouted, wondering why the Emperor had destroyed his life in this manner. Verona interrupted to correct him, explaining that the Emperor was not aware of his existence in the first place. She revealed that the person who masterminded the conspiracy had deceived the Emperor and made him believe things that were not true. Because of this person's plot, the Duchy of Roxelian collapsed and burned to ashes overnight. Dominic barely survived that ordeal, but he found himself an outcast and hounded wherever he went because of his red eyes, which people considered an ill omen. With the specter of death by hunger or cold approaching, he would contemplate the ring he kept as a memento, remembering his mother's wish never to lose it, which prevented him from selling it to meet his needs. In the midst of his despair, a clergyman offered him some bread and soup from the orphanage, blessing him in the name of God who loves all people equally. Thus, Dominic joined the temple's orphanage in pursuit of survival, but danger lurked there as well, where he was subjected to a treacherous attack by one of the priests. Even in that place, his life was threatened by the followers of the mastermind behind everything that happened to him, and he was subjected to torture and shackling. The abusive priest expressed his anger at the boy's stubbornness, admitting the failure of his previous attempt to orchestrate his death to look like an accident. Before his matter could be exposed, the priest decided to end Dominic's life himself, raising a dagger to finish him off while demanding he die immediately. At that moment, when Dominic reached the height of despair and felt he could no longer endure, the unexpected happened. A massive dark energy exploded from him, stunning the abusive priest, after he cut off his hand. In that way, the latent dark magic powers within Dominic awakened. He killed the priest and went on his way to drown the Empire in a sea of blood. But Verona, having returned in time, was determined that this tragic scenario would not be repeated this time, and that she would work to direct his anger toward the right person. She told Dominic that his true enemy was not the Emperor or the priests as he thought. Instead, she revealed to him that the real enemies who destroyed his life were the current Empress and the faction loyal to her. She explained to him the motive behind that. The Empress, fearing for her weak son, was afraid that Dominic would ascend the throne as her nephew and the only other legitimate heir to the royal blood in the Empire. Dominic then realized that his life had been destroyed for this trivial reason, but he found a clarity of purpose and enemies suitable for him. Driven by his newly discovered anger, he announced his intention to kill them all immediately. But Verona stopped him, warning him that this reckless behavior would put his life at risk, and told him that his first step must be to meet the Emperor and reclaim his title as Duke. Dominic sharply rejected her advice, asserting that he would never forgive them, and that his death in the pursuit of revenge was none of her business. She replied to him that she was not asking him to forgive them, but to reclaim everything that was rightfully his. Her words sparked his confusion, so he wondered what she meant by reclaiming everything. She answered in the affirmative, explaining that she meant everything precious and important to him which he lost because of the Empress. While Dominic was lost in thought, wondering why this strange woman was helping him and about her true identity, then he approached Verona to sharply ask her about her identity. She smiled and introduced herself as Verona Rosenthal, the daughter of Count Rosenthal. Dominic cornered her, mockingly questioning how the daughter of a mere count could possess the ability to see the future. He added that her attempt to use this power specifically to save him was something that lacked logic. Verona told him that the reason behind her action was her belief that a future in which he remains alive is the best possible outcome for her as well. Then she assured him that, in the end, she simply wants everyone to be happy one way or another, whether he believes her or not. She sincerely stated to him that she wants to save him. Dominic wondered about the deep meaning of her words. While the high priest and his assistant were approaching, Verona quickly pulled Dominic to hide, asking him to follow her. She took his hand and led him away from sight. The two priests reached the place where they were and wondered about the destination of the person they were supposed to receive. The younger priest was surprised by the emptiness of the place, asserting that he felt someone's presence. But the high priest suggested it was just a hallucination. Despite his conviction, he noted that there was no suitable place to hide there anyway. Meanwhile, Verona had pushed Dominic into a narrow corner to hide together, placing her hand over his mouth to prevent any sound he might make. After moments of tension, she made sure the priests had left. When she stepped away to leave, Verona reminded him not to forget her words, but he called her, asking her to wait. Verona took something out of her pocket and gave it to him. It was a necklace she told him would show him the extent of his soul's corruption. Then she advised him to try to kill as few people as possible, and to use the necklace to check his condition whenever he used black magic. She bid him farewell with a light smile, saying she would see him later. As he watched her leave, he held the necklace she gave him and remembered when she told him. She wanted to save him, regardless of whether he would believe her or not. Dominic holds the necklace tightly, repeating her name in deep thought. At Count Rosentin's house, Verona was wondering if Dominic had believed her, especially with no news coming from the temple. Suddenly, she heard a sound outside her balcony that piqued her curiosity. When she went out to check, she was surprised to find Dominic sitting on a nearby tree branch. She asked him in surprise why he was in such a place, and he mockingly replied that he could not simply enter through the front gate. Verona admitted his logic was sound, but before she could ask him what he wanted, he suddenly disappeared from before her. In a moment, the lights went out and she found herself in his arms. He had appeared behind her suddenly to catch her before she stumbled, warning her to be careful. She asked him in confusion about the reason for what happened, but she noticed he was in pain. Then she was shocked to realize he was injured as blood was staining his clothes. Later, in her bedroom, she was asking him why he was here in this condition. He told her that he had clashed with the Holy Knights while leaving the temple, admitting that he finds it difficult to control his power. Then he reminded her that she had asked him not to kill anyone. However, he was surprised when she told him that this matter was different. Verona unbuttoned his shirt to inspect the wound up close, which caused him tension. She was horrified by the sight of the severe injury and wondered how he could leave such a wound untreated, but he assured her that the wound would heal quickly if the bleeding was stopped properly. When she revealed his back, Verona was shocked to see the deep scars left by the priest's torture, and she realized his suffering was much worse than she had imagined. Dominic commented coldly and mockingly, wondering if she should at least pretend to have some embarrassment. She replied to him that she was not the one who should feel embarrassed since he was the one who was half naked, but he praised her strength and lack of retreat. Her tone changed to empathy, expressing the extent of the pain he must have felt, and wondering why he had bothered to come here despite his severe injury. Dominic warned her not to misunderstand, asserting that he did not come for her sake. She asked him in confusion why he had come then, and he told her that he had a request he wanted her to fulfill. Verona was surprised by the idea of a request, but he assured her that the matter was not difficult. Then he simply asked her to let him stay with her. Surprise caused Verona confusion, and she asked him why he wanted to stay here specifically. He explained to her that he has no other place to go at the moment. Then he took her hand, reminding her that she had asked him not to kill people and not to use black magic, and that he had implemented what she requested, and therefore his request is considered a simple return. He added in a cunning tone that if she wanted to help him to achieve the best possible future, she must take responsibility for that. Verona looked at him with suspicion, wondering about his true intentions, and repeated his name warily, but he replied to her mockingly, asking if she thought he would hurt her. Verona denied that, trying to calm herself from the confusion. Then she thought that his staying here might be in her interest, as his presence under her eyes would make it easier for her to monitor him. And despite her concern about his plans, she saw it as an opportunity. She reluctantly agreed to his staying for a short period and told him to do what he wanted. And since she promised to help him, she would bear this responsibility. When he asked her about her destination, she told him she would go back to finish reading her book, which he had interrupted. Dominic commented that she was the first person he had met who preferred leaving him alone to read a book. Verona answered him that there is a first time for everything, but he suddenly approached her and suggested she talk to him instead of reading a boring book, and to tell him about herself, for example. She told him simply that she was just a count's daughter, and that she did not have a dazzling background as he might expect. Then she advised him for his own sake not to drop his guard toward her. Dominic found her talk boring and took the book from her, so Verona contemplated him, noting that he resembles cats in his fickle behavior. Later, Dominic was still reading the book, wondering how long she would continue reading, but he discovered that she had fallen asleep at her desk, so he commented in surprise on her sleeping this way. So he carried her to put her in her bed, and he was thinking about his future plans as he decided that once he recovered, he would secure temporary housing and information sources for himself to know more about the internal affairs of the imperial family. Then he added another matter to his plans, which was knowing more about Verona herself. Meanwhile, Verona was dreaming, and in her dream, she saw herself in a beautiful garden and heard a voice calling her name. In her dream, she found herself standing before her friend Devine and the hero Aiden, who were surprised at her presence there. Aiden told her that Devine had been waiting for her all along, so Verona apologized, saying she did not want to interrupt their precious time together. But Aiden replied rudely that it would have been better if she had not come at all, which prompted Devine to scold him for his hurtful words. Verona knew in her heart that she had made a terrible choice by intervening in their fate, for she knew that this choice might hurt them, and might even drive them to hate her, but she was ready to accept everything as long as they would be happy in the end. Devine took her hand and asked her if that was a choice she had made for her sake, and she told her that she would understand everything as long as her friend Verona remained happy. Devine confirmed to her in the dream that regardless of any choice Verona makes, their eternal friendship would not change. Verona smiled hearing that, realizing how wonderful her friend Devine is. But a sudden voice woke her from her dream to find Dominic directly above her, asking her about the name she was calling out throughout her sleep. Verona woke up to find him beside her on the bed. When she asked him in confusion how she reached here, while she remembers she was reading a book, he told her that he carried her to the bed after she was overcome by sleepiness. Then he returned to ask her about the identity of Devine, whose name she was muttering in her sleep. Verona remembered at that moment the truth of Dominic's fate. For the reason that turns him into a full-fledged villain was his involvement with the story's heroes. He had become obsessed with the heroine Devine. Therefore, she realized that she must not talk about Devine in front of him at all. She tried to evade his question, claiming she was just a friend he did not need to know, but he pointed out that her crying over her in her dream means she is more than just a friend. Verona got angry at his persistence and wondered why he was watching her face while she was sleeping without permission. At that moment, the maid's voice interrupted them, asking if her mistress was awake. Rose, the maid, stood before the door, calling her mistress again, wondering why there was no response, although the time to wake up had come. Anxiety began to creep into her, and she wondered if something was wrong, and threatened to open the door if there was no response. Verona screamed, asking her not to open the door, while Dominic was holding her hand to prevent her. Verona took his hand and assured him not to worry. Then she promised him that she would never betray him. Outside, Rose's anxiety increased, and she wondered if harm had befallen her mistress, so she rushed to open the door while screaming her name. But Verona was lying in her bed and told Rose that she did not feel well. Rose offered her help and to bring medicine, but Verona refused gently, saying she would get better if she rested for a while. As Rose was leaving, she noticed that the balcony door was open, so she pointed to the presence of something there. Verona hurried to close the door, claiming she had opened it for ventilation only. Then she asked her to return later because she wanted to rest, pushing her gently out of the room. She thanked Rose and sent her out while she was in a state of confusion. After the maid left, Verona remained alone, wondering in anxiety about what this new path she chose hides for her. But her anxiety was interrupted by Dominic's appearance on the balcony, who asked her sarcastically if she thought she would scream just because of the presence of a strange man in her room, asserting that he does not fully trust her yet. Then he revealed to her that he was fully prepared to kill her and her maid if she showed any suspicious movement, so Verona asked him if he would do that using black magic. After he confirmed to her the truth of her words, she inquired from him about the reason for his obvious lack of being affected by using black magic. So he explained that he is not affected at all. On the contrary, every time he uses his power, he feels he is becoming stronger. Then he noticed her unusual interest in black magic recently. In a sharp tone and piercing gaze, he wondered if someone close to her had died due to the use of black magic. His sharp looks brought back a bloody image from his past, but Verona maintained her composure before him. Then she turned her face away from him and told him indifferently to think what he wanted, and that if he did not trust her, then let him kill her, for she did not care. Her coldness provoked his anger, so he grabbed her and asked her about the reason for her underestimating her life to this extent. or whether she really wished for death. Verona smiled calmly and answered him that she does not wish for death, at least not now, for she felt that many things would change in this life. Then she walked past him, saying that his believing her or not is a matter that belongs to him, but he must remember one thing, which is that she will never betray his trust, and that she will prove that to him repeatedly whenever he doubts her matter. Then she placed her hand before him, confirming to him that she bears full responsibility for her decision to help him. So Dominic smiled a light smile and shook her hand, announcing his acceptance of her as an official ally for him. In celebration of this alliance, Verona decided to provide him with valuable information, so she told him that a gifted knight would appear soon to become a shackle hindering his path. Dominic underestimated the matter, wondering if it was just a knight, but she warned him that this opponent is not as easy as he imagines. She explained that although he is just an apprentice knight at the current time, he possesses a vast latent talent. For this reason, he will constitute an annoying opponent even for him, and she advised him that it is better for him to avoid meeting him. So Dominic told her that he would take her warning into account, and when he turned to leave, she asked him about his destination. So he answered her while wearing his cloak that he was going for a short walk. While he was walking disguised in his cloak among the crowds of people, Verona's words and her pledge not to betray him were echoing in his mind. He thought that she is a truly strange woman, as she did not tremble at threats, but said what she wanted to say with all boldness. And he wondered if this was the reason for his fascination with her, or whether he really desired her. But the most strange matter for him was her lack of concern for her life, which puzzled him greatly. Suddenly, he heard her voice in his mind, clearly saying, "I long for death, Dominic," which stunned him and made him call her name wondering. He tried to convince himself that what he heard was just an auditory hallucination, but another mysterious voice whispered to him that he knows nothing. Dominic looked around in shock and confusion, wondering about the truth of what just happened. Then he turned to look toward her palace, thinking deeply about the secrets she hides from him. After a few days, Verona returned to find Dominic in the palace. She received him, noting that he always goes out on a daily walk. Dominic answered her that he was preparing to reclaim his duchy she talked about earlier, which made Verona wonder about his seriousness. While he was turning to leave, those words he heard in his mind, "I long for death, Dominic," returned to echo in his mind again. He asked Verona coldly what else he could do, and told her he would return by evening. Then he took off in a flash of black magic, leaving Verona wondering what he does all day outside. But she soon shook the idea from her head, convincing herself that she does not need to care about what he does, and that she has more important matters to do. While she was about to go out, her maid Rose appeared to ask her if she intended to go out, so Verona ordered her to prepare a carriage immediately and asked her to keep the matter a secret from her father. Rose was surprised at this request and wondered about her destination that required all this secrecy. Verona approached her and whispered in her ear, asking her if she knew about the existence of a sister to her father. After Rose confirmed her knowledge of the matter, Verona revealed to her that she was looking for her cousin, which caused the maid extreme shock and amazement. Rose mentioned hesitantly what she had heard about the marriage of the Count's sister to a commoner despite her family's objection, and she confirmed to Verona that she knows that her aunt had left the Count's house because of that. Verona told her, with a faint smile, that she is fully aware of all that happened. Then she explained to her that her aunt's husband had died early, and that her aunt is now suffering from a terminal illness, and her only wish is for her son at least to return to the family fold. But Rose seemed confused and wondered about the reason for that, so Verona interrupted her, placing her finger on her lips to be silent. Then she assured her that she would return before it was too late, and asked her again to keep the matter a secret until then. Verona left while Rose looked at her with concern, but she reluctantly agreed. While she was walking disguised in her cloak, she thought that her cousin is likely to be near the nobles district, and decided to discover his place through the information guild. But suddenly a young knight appeared before her and warned her that this area is not safe. Verona stood in terror to ask him what he was doing here, but he seemed confused and asked her if she knew him. Verona rectified the situation quickly and claimed she had mistaken him, while she was thinking that she did not expect to meet him this quickly. For this young man was Louis, the promising holy knight whom she warned Dominic about. Verona realized that he would have been the best opponent to face Dominic with, but now, after she decided to help Dominic, she found it difficult to face him. Louis repeated his warning that the area is dangerous and asked her to return, but she suggested that each of them go their own way. However, he refused and insisted on accompanying her to the main road, which Verona refused, asserting there was no need for that. So she told him sharply that if he wished to accompany a lady, he should look elsewhere, which made him freeze in his place, affected by the sharpness of her words and her fiery hair color. Verona tried to bypass him and apologized to leave, but he stopped her again, determined to accompany her to her destination. Verona felt frustration, for she had spoken with him forcefully on purpose, Yet he did not back down, and she wondered why this meeting occurred in this place in particular. At that moment, her attention was drawn to a medicine bag hanging from his waist, engraved with his name, Louis. So she wondered if he had come here to buy some medicine. Verona suddenly remembered, upon seeing the medicine bag, that Louis's only noble mother was suffering from a serious illness. Even though she knew the mother's fate was death in the end, as stated in the novel, she felt concerned that if she continued in this manner, she would become emotionally attached to her. Louis interrupted her thoughts, confirming that he had no hidden motives and that all he wanted was to ensure she was safe. Verona sighed and accepted his accompaniment, but she set one condition: that she was going to meet a child, and she asked him to take over the protection of that child. Louis agreed immediately and without hesitation, assuring her to leave the matter to him. Verona noted that, as always, when it came to helping others, he never considered the consequences. Then she told him that their destination was close by, and he responded calmly. He offered to lead the way since the place was dangerous, but she mockingly asked him how he would do that when he didn't know her destination, which embarrassed him. Meanwhile, Dominic was watching them from afar without them noticing his presence. When they arrived, Louis asked her about their destination, and she told him it was the Information Guild. He wondered if it concerned the child she would meet, and she answered in the affirmative, explaining that those inside knew the whereabouts of that child. Upon entering, a man greeted them, commenting that he saw a rare guest, referring to Verona. He added that this was not the kind of place ladies usually frequented, to which Verona replied that her identity was not important. She then emphasized that this place was for investigating anything as long as the fee was paid, and placed a gold coin on the table. The man admitted she was absolutely right. Verona revealed her request, that a certain noble house had hired several strong men to prevent a red-haired boy from approaching it. The man pretended his memory was a bit hazy, but then suddenly remembered that the boy was causing a stir about wanting to meet someone. Verona demanded he tell her the boy's location, but the man claimed it was difficult because the client was an important figure. Verona sighed in despair and pulled out a precious ornate pin, offering it to him. The man questioned if it was genuine, but Verona reminded him that he already knew her social standing, meaning the pin was real. The man laughed and agreed to give her a rough map, explaining that the boy was currently staying in a cheap inn and suggested she visit him soon before he was kicked out from there as well. As the man handed her the map, Verona expressed her hope that the information was correct. The man assured her that it was impossible for him to provide false information and reached out to touch her inappropriately. But in a swift movement, Louis drew his sword and placed it against the man's neck. He coldly ordered him to pull his hand away and apologize immediately if he valued his life. The man gave a nervous laugh and apologized, commenting on her having a very loyal companion, while Louis glared at him sharply. Verona intervened, placing her hand on his shoulder, telling him that the man wasn't worth the trouble and that they should leave. Louis replied, hiding his blushing face, that he understood. As they were leaving, he asked if she was truly all right with what happened. She told him that it was annoying, but she was fine. However, Louis insisted she should have made him apologize formally. Louis concluded from her words that she too had come to help the poor boy, and asked if this boy was the same child she had asked him to protect. After Verona confirmed his deduction, Louis announced his desire to accompany her as well. A friendly smile formed on Verona's face as she invited him to follow her to the carriage, and he responded with obvious shyness, agreeing to her request. But Louis stopped suddenly, which piqued her curiosity. She asked why he stopped, but he quickly dismissed a strange feeling that had overcome him, assuming it was just an illusion. Verona told him not to scare her like that. Then they continued on their way. Unaware of his presence, Dominic was watching them from the shadows, wondering, with resentment about the meaning of Verona's actions and why she hadn't even noticed his presence. Then he realized that the night with her was the same gifted holy night she had spoken of. He bitterly recalled her warning that this night would be an annoying opponent even for him, and that it was better for him not to meet him. His confusion increased as he wondered why she was allowed to meet him while he was not. As he watched them walking together, a feeling of resentment took hold of him. He then admitted to himself that he didn't like this night, perhaps because he was a knight from the temple, and his dark energy began to surge around him. Meanwhile, inside the carriage, Louis was contemplating Verona and her red hair, which seemed to him like a glowing flame. Verona noticed his intense staring and asked if something was wrong. He looked away in embarrassment, claiming it was nothing, then asked about their destination. She told him with a smile that they were headed to the checkpoint and asked him to use the name of God to facilitate matters upon arrival. She told Louis that with a good person like him, there was probably no need to say that, but he was surprised when she uttered his name and asked in amazement how she knew it. Verona pointed with her eyes toward the medicine bag hanging from his waist, explaining that his name was written on it. Louis sighed, and Verona commented that she didn't know who the patient was but hoped they would get better soon. Louis thanked Verona for her words, but noticed that her way of speaking had become less formal without him realizing. Verona felt embarrassed and apologized if that had bothered him, but he assured her that he didn't mind and that she could speak with him comfortably. Verona smiled a light smile, thinking she should be more careful about her habits. Upon their arrival, she praised Louis for his fine manners, but Louis admitted he had only studied noble etiquette theoretically. Verona advised him to act the same way whenever he met a noble, and to tell her if anyone tried to embarrass him. She added with a cunning smile that dealing with nobles who abused their power was one of her hobbies, then invited him to proceed. As they were walking through an alleyway, Verona pointed out that the place they were looking for was on the map, but it seemed deserted. Suddenly, Louis froze in his place when he saw 3 men beating someone. Verona realized that the one being beaten was that child, her cousin, whom she had asked Louis to help. One of the attackers was mocking the boy, reminding him that he had warned him against wandering around and asked him if he thought he was a fool. Then he shouted in his face angrily, asking if he was listening, and raised his fist to deliver a powerful punch. But before his fist could reach the boy, a strong hand caught it, stopping it in its tracks. The owner of the hand was Louis, who ordered him to stop. The attacker turned around angrily to ask about his identity, to which Louis replied by questioning what crime the boy had committed. The attacker answered with a mocking smile that his crime was annoying a nobleman, and warned him that it would be better for him to walk away quietly if he did not want to get hurt. But Louis did not heed his threat. Instead, he tightened his grip and twisted the man's arm forcefully, making him scream in intense pain. Verona watched him in amazement, realizing that he was more ruthless than she had imagined, and it seemed to her that he possessed enough strength to face the entire empire's knights alone. At that moment, a troubling thought occurred to her. If she allowed Louis to meet Dominic, they would likely not stop fighting until one of them died, so she closed her eyes in anxiety, assuring herself that she must never allow them to meet at all. Although she had warned Dominic, the matter had now become more complicated. Then she wondered to herself what Dominic might be doing in the meantime. At that moment, the attacker shouted, threatening Louis and asking if he thought he would get away with his action. But Louis replied calmly that it did not matter. If someone committed a mistake, they simply had to bear the appropriate responsibility. Then he warned the man whose arm he had broken not to try something like that again. The 2 men could do nothing but vow that he would pay the price before they fled. Verona approached Louis and praised him, saying that, as expected, he could become an official knight at any time, but he reminded her that he thought he had asked her to stay back. She replied that this time it was her turn, and she stepped toward the frightened boy, who was repeating in an attempt to defend himself that he was not at fault. Verona called him by his name, Julian, which shocked him and made him wonder how she knew his name, so she revealed her identity to him as his cousin, Verona Rosentin. But Julian looked at her with suspicion and asked if she had come to warn him against coveting the Rosentin family name. Verona smiled and denied it, then dropped her bombshell by announcing that she intended to make him the heir to the Count's family, leaving Julian in a state of utter shock. He asked her in confusion what she was talking about, so she explained that she meant she would make him Count Rosentin. But he remained in his bewilderment and repeated his question about what that truly meant. Verona changed her tone to a playful one and gently scolded him, saying she was older than him and questioning his way of speaking to his elder cousin. When he asked her how she could do that, she answered that it was simple. She only needed to register him in the family records and appoint him as the heir. Julian objected, wondering why she chose him even though the Count himself had tried to expel him, so she told him there was no doubt he carried Rosentin blood. Then she reached out her hand to him, offering him her protection, and invited him to go to the palace together. Julian took her hand hesitantly and asked if she wanted something from him in return. She replied with a humorous request, that she wanted him to take care of her in her old age, which sparked his confusion and amazement. While she was wiping his face with a handkerchief, she told him that she hated political marriages like the rest of the nobles. Julian understood her point and concluded that she was making him the heir because she did not want to marry. She confirmed to him that this was exactly what she was saying, and that she only expected him to return the favor eventually. Then she smiled and asked him if this was a bad deal, and if he would come with her. Julian's face turned red with shyness, and he agreed, but he wondered about the reason for her intense hatred for the idea of arranged marriage. But as she was about to answer, her foot suddenly tripped, and she fell to the ground by surprise. Before she fell, Louis caught her quickly and asked anxiously if she was all right. Verona replied that the reason she hated arranged marriage was that there was no one among the candidates who possessed a face even close to her taste, which left Louis in a state of shock and Julian in confusion. Louis commented shyly that her joke was a bit harsh, and they did not know that Dominic was watching them from a distance with a stoic expression. Later, while Verona was moving with Julian, she asked him about his mother's condition, as she had heard her health was not good. Julian told her sadly that his mother had passed away and that this was the reason for his coming to the capital. Verona realized in her heart that things had gone exactly as she thought. Then Julian asked her about the most important thing, how she would convince the Count, her father, to accept him. Verona reassured him and told him not to worry, for she had already thought of a few ways to handle the matter. But she admitted in secret that she herself did not have confidence in her ability to convince her father. Nevertheless, in the midst of her endlessly repeating life, she had learned an important lesson, that continuing to try eventually leads to success. If one method did not work, she would use another. And if that failed too, she would find something else. She decided that she must stop thinking that everything ends if she dies. Suddenly, Dominic's words occurred to her, in which he asked if she truly wished for death, and she wondered why those words appeared in her mind at that specific moment. She shook the idea from her head and decided that she must hurry back, for she thought that the black cat, meaning Dominic, might already be at home waiting for her. Verona turned toward Louis and Julian and asked them to wait for a moment, which piqued Louis's curiosity. Then she ordered them not to follow her, asserting that she would not go far. She walked a few steps to a nearby alley, only to find Dominic standing there waiting for her. He asked her coldly if that man was her secret, so she told him that she was followed and that he must have heard his identity, confirming that she met Louis for the first time today. Dominic smiled mockingly, commenting that it seemed they had become close enough to call each other by name. Verona explained to him that Louis was the holy knight she had told him about, and that it would not be bad to build a good relationship with him for the sake of the future. But Dominic sharply questioned whether it was truly necessary to get that close to him. He added that if he were as impressive a holy knight as she claimed, he should have cut off the arms of that rascal in the information guild who dared to touch her. Verona then realized he had seen everything. Dominic reproached her, saying she should have told him her plan, as he was the person who was supposed to be cooperating with her and the person she trusted more than anyone else. Verona smiled and asked him if he was worried that she might betray him by allying with the temple. She reassured him that would not happen and suggested they talk about the matter later and calmly. But he grabbed her hand and called her by name, asking her to focus only on him. Louis suddenly appeared and sharply ordered Dominic to let go of her hand. Tension escalated between the two men, and Verona realized, standing between them, that everything was ruined. In a moment, Louis drew his sword in Dominic's face, starting the confrontation she had feared. Dominic ignored Louis's threat mockingly, wondering if he thought a mere holy knight could intimidate him. But Verona intervened firmly to defuse the situation, ordering Dominic not to start a fight and demanding Louis sheath his sword. Louis saw in the scene a suspicious man holding a noble lady by force, which pushed him to act. Dominic replied with disdain, telling Louis that it was none of his business and that he should leave, then mockingly asked him what he thought he would do with that sword. The situation intensified when Louis threatened to cut Dominic's neck if he did not step back, making Dominic realize the seriousness of his opponent and wonder if he truly intended to fight him. In a moment of despair over the two men's stubbornness, Verona felt extreme frustration. With a sudden and reckless movement, Verona grabbed the sword blade with her bare hand, which struck both Dominic and Louis with great shock, and drove Louis to scream, warning her of the danger. Then she scolded them, explaining that she took this action because they were fighting without listening to her, and she wanted to show them who would truly get hurt if they continued their conflict. Louis realized his mistake and apologized immediately, admitting that he had forgotten his duty for a moment. Verona announced that she would return to the palace, but Dominic asked her sharply if she would continue to give priority to that boy until the end. Verona denied it, asserting that she had urgent work, as her primary concern at that moment was separating them, and that she would explain the matter to Dominic later. Then she added that he also had matters to attend to and suggested they speak again after each of them finished their business. Dominic was not convinced by her words and let out a mocking laugh expressing his resentment. While they were boarding the carriage, Louis asked Verona if that man was an acquaintance of hers. She replied that he was, but that he was not that important. Louis advised her to keep her distance from him, admitting he had a bad feeling about him. Verona smiled and thanked him for his concern. She thought to herself that if Louis were more flexible, she could have convinced him that Dominic was not as bad as he thought. But she realized that Louis always valued justice above all else in all her lives. Her doubts were confirmed when she realized Louis's principle was fixed, that whoever commits a mistake must bear the responsibility, concluding it was impossible to convince him otherwise. Upon their arrival at the palace, she apologized to him for wasting his time and asked him to return. But she invited him to return to the palace at a later time, promising she would give him better medicine than the one he possessed. Louis was flustered by her offer, but she reassured him that it was not a bribe, but a reward for his intervention and help in a difficult situation. Louis told her sincerely that she was a kind person, Verona wondered in surprise if the reason for this sudden compliment was her promise of the better medicine, but Louis told her not to expect anything from him, for he did what he saw as right, then asked her if she was worried about what might happen between him and that man in the end. Verona was flustered by his question, but he explained that he expected nothing from her, and that he only stated the facts. Verona felt embarrassed and tried to evade the situation, asserting that this was not what she meant. Louis smiled and told her that he could not judge her thoughts by his own standards, which surprised Verona, as she did not expect such words from a straight-laced person like him. Louis expressed his happiness if they could meet again, but Verona told him they likely would not meet again. She noticed the disappointment on Louis's face, and he replied that he understood. Verona changed her mind and gave him a challenge, that she might feel curious and come to see him if he became the best knight in the capital and became the talk of everyone. Louis was filled with enthusiasm and promised to do his best, but she jokingly warned him that if he worked harder, other people might die, so he agreed to be moderate. After Verona bid him farewell, she encouraged him to move forward on his path and told him she had to leave now. But before she left, Louis offered his help at any time she might need it. As she walked away, doubts began to haunt her about the correctness of her decision. She had warned Louis about Dominic, but she was not sure if that was the right thing to do. She felt in her heart that matters had begun to get more and more complicated. Elsewhere, one of Dominic's followers was asking him if he had managed to meet the lady he was tasked with monitoring, to which Dominic replied in the affirmative. Dominic recalled what he had seen, wondering about the reason for Verona's presence in such a place accompanied by that knight, and remembered her words that she would speak to him later, admitting she was right in that. He did not forget the massive holy power that Louis had released in that brief confrontation, but he underestimated that power, believing it was just a talent that could be easily crushed, while dark magic energy surged from his hand. With glowing red eyes, he wondered to himself if he should finish off that night, but a mysterious voice whispered to him to do as he pleased. And at that moment, Verona's voice echoed in his mind as she thought that she had to die again, which stopped him from proceeding with his plan. Dominic was annoyed by hearing those voices again and wondered if there was a secret regarding her that he did not yet know. Dominic returned to his meeting with his men and asked them if there were any new movements among the nobility. The answer was no, so he ordered them to move forward with the set plan. One of them asked if he was headed to the royal palace now. After he confirmed that to them, he brought to mind Verona's words urging him to reclaim what was his. So he resolved to reclaim everything that had been stolen from him. The next day at Rosenton Palace, the maid Rose was asking Verona anxiously if she was truly all right. The maid had expressed her doubts about the wisdom of bringing Julian into the palace without informing the count, but Verona reassured her that everything would be fine. Then she entered Julian's room, who was wearing new noble clothes from Verona, and called her by the title Sister, expressing his shyness and feeling that these clothes did not suit him. But she encouraged him, saying that this was not true at all, and that they looked perfect on him. Then she promised him not to worry, and that she would handle everything and speak with her father as soon as he returned. The maids had noticed the boy's presence the previous night and wondered in whispers about his identity. One of them noticed the color of his hair and wondered if he was from a side branch of the family, but the other remembered the Count had a sister, realizing in shock who that boy was. Julian returned to express his fear of being expelled again. Verona reassured him, asserting that this was his rightful place and that his mother's expulsion in the past would not change the fact of his belonging. Then she asked him if he had not come here because he wished to become a member of the Rosentin family. He answered her that he came only to meet his family. He added that he did not want the position of heir because he no longer possessed anything, which surprised Verona. She told him that she might not be the family he wished for, and that it would be difficult to change her father's mind, but she promised him she would do everything in her power. She revealed to him that she had already decided to protect and care for him from the moment she decided to bring him with her. Julian was touched by her words and decided to trust her, despite his uncertainty as to whether he deserved it. Verona replied that this was not important now, and that she did not intend to burden him or place high expectations on him, but he remained anxious, admitting that he knew nothing and fearing that his actions would cause the family to collapse. Verona smiled and decided that her first step was to find him a tutor to teach him etiquette and manners. Verona told Julian that she would explain the things he did not understand one by one, and began with her first piece of advice: not to trust people easily. Julian innocently asked if that meant it was right to trust only her, but she surprised him by saying he should not trust her either, explaining that this was the nature of noble families. However, she returned to tell him that he could trust her a little. His innocence seemed to her like a small chick that had lost its mother. Then she asked him to rest in his room and promised she would prepare a doctor for him immediately. He agreed happily. As Verona was about to leave, her maid Rose hugged her suddenly, which surprised her. Rose apologized to Verona, admitting she had treated her like a child all this time, but now she had grown up and become a wonderful young woman. Rose added that she was very lucky to serve her, but Verona reassured her she could treat her as a child whenever she wished, asserting she trusted no one but her. At that moment, an angry voice interrupted them, questioning the meaning of what was happening. Verona realized her father had returned, so she decided to go greet him, while Rose wished her all the best. On her way, she found Roderick, her father's assistant, waiting for her, who called her respectfully. Verona told Roderick that the Count seemed very upset and asked where they had been. She told him she would not reveal his secret, asserting that she trusted him. He approached her and whispered in her ear, asking her to promise to keep the matter a secret from the Count. Then he revealed to her that His Majesty the Emperor had urgently summoned the high-ranking nobles that morning. The reason was reports of the return of his missing nephew and his inheritance of the title of Duke of Roxelierne. Verona realized in shock that Dominic had done it. Roderick confirmed to her that His Majesty had verified for himself that the person in question was indeed his nephew, and that the Count seemed very confused, especially since this was happening at a time when the Crown Prince was trying to strengthen his position. Verona thought this confusion was logical. Her father supported the Crown Prince, and she wondered about the type of conversation that took place between Dominic and the Emperor and how he managed to reclaim his title in one night, even though she was the one who incited him to do so. She remembered Dominic's words when she asked him to talk later, realizing that he also had tasks to complete. Roderick asked her the reason for her presence. She told him she had come to speak with her father regarding a certain matter. He allowed her to enter, while she thought that she was curious to know the circumstances, but could not allow Dominic to precede her. When she entered, she noticed Roderick's sharp gaze behind her. Her father was sitting in his office, looking exhausted, and called her to wait to speak later. But she approached him and told him she had an important matter she wished to speak about. He listened to her, and she announced she had chosen an heir for the family, which made him stand up from his seat in surprise, wondering if she had finally chosen a husband. Verona denied it, then asked him if he was aware of the existence of a child named Julian, which shocked him deeply. He shouted, asking if she meant that child. She confirmed she meant Julian Rosentin. Then she dropped her bombshell, announcing she planned to make that child the heir to the Count's family. Her father asked her in bewilderment how she knew Julian. She told him she had met him by chance the previous day and felt he resembled her a lot, and her intuition turned out to be correct. She added that some men were attacking him. Her father asked in shock about the reason for him being attacked. Verona cleverly hinted that her father might be the one who issued the order to assault Julian, which made him tense. But he denied it, explaining that he only ordered his expulsion from the noble residential area and refused to recognize him as a member of this house, considering him the son of someone who betrayed the family. Verona calmly reminded him that his sister was no longer alive. She told him that this anger was useless and that Julian was a talented child. If taught properly, he would surely become a worthy heir. Then she urged him to seize this opportunity to become a wise count himself. Her father seemed lost in thought, but he admitted it was too late for that, and that the matter was impossible. Verona was not entirely ignorant of her father's feelings. She recalled the story of her aunt who ran away with a commoner knight and how that story was circulated repeatedly, causing damage to the family's reputation. But she saw that he had no right to say that. He was the one who betrayed her mother. While her father was squandering money on his mistress, her mother was desperately trying to save the family's finances, which were collapsing. In the end, her mother died of heart disease. As for her father, he lost everything after that. Not only his health, but also his family's status and even his mistress who fled. Verona returned to address her father, asserting that she too was concerned about the family's future and could not allow it to be handed over to people who did not deserve it, and that the heir must be someone who at least showed him respect. The Count finally yielded to her words and ordered a room to be prepared for the boy, explaining that the matter of officially registering him in the family records could be decided later. But Verona was not satisfied with that. She returned to ask him what he intended to do regarding the assault on Julian, hinting again that it was not his order. He admitted it was a mistake to task Roderick with hiring anyone, but downplayed the matter, considering it fine as long as the boy was not severely injured, and asked her to learn when she should remain silent and turn a blind eye. Verona realized then that her father's judgment could not be relied upon, especially since the true suspect, Roderick, was close to them. Despite the ambiguity of his words, she considered it a tacit recognition of Julian as a family member for now. After the urgent matter was settled, she decided she had to meet Dominic soon. Upon her exit, Roderick was waiting for her and asked if her discussion had ended well. She answered briefly, but he told her that their voices were audible from outside. Then he revealed he had heard of her meeting with the boy, Julian. He pretended to be curious, claiming he had never met him before, but she realized there was no point in him pretending to be innocent. She knew the full story. After her mother's death, Roderick was hired to rebuild the family, but in truth he harbored ambitions to seize the entire palace for himself. He was planning to forge a will after her father's death and force her to marry him. For this reason, she loathed him intensely. If he only wanted the title, she wouldn't have hated him that much. But now she could not ignore his slimy gazes. Verona turned away from him and told him her father would likely speak with him soon. But he approached her in a troubling manner, saying he wanted to hear it from her directly, claiming they were close enough for that. But a servant suddenly interrupted them, calling for the assistant lord and informing him that the count requested him. Roderick was surprised by the count summoning him, wondering about the reason since there was not supposed to be any work that day. But the servant insisted the matter was urgent, so Roderick agreed to go immediately and left the place. After he left, Verona thanked the servant who informed him, but she stopped him, expressing her lack of knowledge of his identity. The servant answered her calmly, then revealed his face, which was none other than Dominic's face, and asked her if she knew him now. Shock struck Verona, and she uttered his name in bewilderment. Before she could process what was happening, he had entered the room and closed the door behind him. She then grabbed him and asked in panic how he got in here. Dominic wondered if there was any problem. Verona hurriedly reminded him that he was no longer just Dominic, but was now the Duke of Roxelierne. But he suddenly asked her to stop those actions of hers. Then he asked her not to call him by that title. At least not her. He explained to her that when she calls him that, he feels as if she is putting a distance between them. Verona thought to herself that she knew something was wrong since yesterday, and told him that there was not one person in the Empire who wished to distance themselves from the Duke. Rather, young women were likely now competing for the position of Duchess. So he directed the question to her in turn, wondering about her own opinion on the matter. She turned away from him, announcing she was not interested in marriage, and warned him against uttering such words lightly. In a sudden movement, he approached her, assuring her that he was completely serious in his words. Verona was surprised by the intensity of his gaze and his seriousness, wondering to herself what was truly going on in his mind. She revealed to him that there was someone she had been thinking about recently, which sparked his confusion about this person's identity. But she surprised him by mentioning the name Julian, expressing her intense curiosity about him, which sparked Dominic's resentment. Questioning why Julian was being brought into their conversation, she approached him and asked if he hated it that much to be close to someone else. She explained to him that the reason for his coming was to settle the matter of their agreement, and reassured him she did not intend to betray him. He replied that this was not what worried him. She asked him about the source of his real concern. He admitted to her that he simply did not like the existence of facts about her that he did not know. Verona thought in secret that she would be the one in trouble if he came closer. She realized the truth of her fears. He was not the villain in this novel, and she did not know how. Many lives she had left. She feared that if she formed a deep bond with him in this life, she would not be able to kill him without hesitation in the future. He interrupted her thoughts while touching a lock of her hair, wondering about the number of people she planned to bring into her life. She brushed his hand away, asserting that her life was simple, but he questioned her words while holding her hair. At that moment, Julian's voice interrupted them, calling her from behind the door. Verona pointed out Julian's presence outside. Dominic coldly suggested she simply dismiss him, but she refused, explaining she was the only person that child could rely on now, which sparked Dominic's resentment as he downplayed the matter. Verona allowed Julian to enter. He opened the door hesitantly and asked if he had interrupted their talk. Verona hurried to close the curtains and claimed she was doing nothing but ventilating the room, while Dominic stood silently outside with his arms crossed. After they were alone, Julian initiated the question about the result of her talk with the Count. Verona told him that things went well and that her father would prepare a room for him and provide a tutor as well, which made Julian ask her eagerly if that was truly true. Verona noticed the change in his expression and asked if there was something causing him concern. Julian admitted his fears, wondering if he would truly be able to manage an Count's house, especially since he lived all his life as a commoner, and feared making a grave mistake on a major occasion like royal balls. Verona tried to ease his mind in a playful manner, assuring him that the matter did not warrant all this concern. There were many adult nobles who made mistakes, then returned to ask him seriously if he did not wish to become the heir. Julian immediately denied it, asserting he wished to confirm all his rights, not just for his sake, but for his mother's sake too. Then he explained that what truly worried him was that he did not want to seize her position as the legitimate heir, while Dominic was watching their conversation from afar. Verona smiled and patted his head affectionately to reassure him, explaining to him that if she wanted the title, she would have sought it long ago. Julian was touched by her words and enthusiastically pledged that he would work hard to become a great count. He added that he would ensure no one would be able to marry her. His last promise flustered her, so she stammered in her reply, while Dominic was still watching the situation closely. Verona turned toward the window where Dominic was standing and asked how long he planned to stay there, which sparked Julian's confusion, who asked her if something was wrong. Verona denied there was any problem. Julian apologized for his sudden intrusion and told her he would leave now. As Julian was leaving the room, Verona bid him farewell with a wave of her hand. Dominic approached her, commenting that she should make Julian tougher, because he would be useless to her in his current state, and wondered why he was so upset even though the title came to him on a silver platter. Verona replied to him that human hearts are not this simple, and promised him she would take care of Julian's matter and asked him not to worry about him. But he insisted that Julian was the heir she chose, and therefore he had the right to worry about him too, making her wonder about the nature of the relationship he saw between them. Then he warned her that if things continued as they were, that boy would inevitably become a burden on her. Verona noticed in his tone an interest and concern for her, and wondered to herself in amazement. She did not know of this side of his character. When she touched his face, she ordered him not to act childishly and commented on his constant interference in her conversations, saying he always appears unexpectedly. She told him she would have allocated time for him if he had submitted a proper request for a meeting. Dominic wondered if she would truly listen to him if he submitted a formal request. The next day, while she was reading a letter, she said that this person had lost his mind. The maid thought she was talking about her and asked if she had done something wrong, to which Verona replied that the problem was not in her, but in the gift she had just received. It was a basket of red roses accompanied by a strange message that read, "To the heartless one." Verona wondered about the meaning of this strange phrase, while the maid Rose wondered about the identity of the person pursuing her mistress with such passion. Rose asked what was written in the letter, but Verona described it as nonsense, claiming she did not know the sender and did not care about him. But Rose realized from her reaction that she knew the sender's identity well, but was not pleased with him. While Verona was looking at the letter, she noticed Rose seemed happy about the matter somehow. The maid Rose cleverly pointed out that if her mistress truly hated the sender, she would have stopped caring for those flowers long ago. She concluded that her not ordering the disposal of the rose basket meant that her impression of that person was not bad after all. At that moment, Verona brought back the memory of her words as she asked Dominic to return to his home. She remembered how he described her as a heartless lady because she was expelling someone who traveled all that distance to see her, and how she coldly replied to him to use his time for something more important if all he was going to say was mere nonsense. But he did not leave. Instead, he approached her and planted a kiss on her forehead. She asked him in confusion what he was doing. He told her that since she continued building walls between them, he had decided to try tearing them down. Then he smiled and promised her that he would visit her officially soon, before disappearing in a flash of black magic. Verona admitted to herself that she could not push him away at that moment. Although she described their conversations as trivial, she was strangely enjoying them, but she soon scolded herself, reminding her of the need to stay composed. He was, after all, the villain in this story, and there was no guarantee this relationship would continue in her next life, so she must not drop her guard. A week later, Julian asked her if she should tell that person to stop sending more gifts. His sudden question flustered her. She asked him how he knew about the matter and tried to hide her embarrassment with a slight cough. They were interrupted by the maid Rose, who entered carrying a tray. Verona commented that Rose and Julian had become very close in the past week. Verona asked Julian not to worry about her, and to focus on his food and growth first. Julian objected that he was no longer small. Verona encouraged him, saying he would grow soon, surely, and praised him because he began acting like a real aristocrat, despite only a few days passing since his education began. Julian rejoiced at hearing that and enthusiastically told her that the assistant Roderick had promised to provide a fencing instructor. The mention of Roderick's name worried Verona, and she wondered to herself about the truth of his intentions and plans. She asked Julian if he remembered the first lesson she taught him. He answered that it was not to trust anyone but her. She corrected him, insisting he be especially careful of the assistant, for he was the person who caused him harm previously, which shocked Julian because he did not know that. She advised him that since he knew the truth now, he must be careful from now on. Then Verona looked at the garden, thinking that her guest was late. Meanwhile, the heroine of the story, who had been avoiding meeting Dominic for fear of him, was waiting in her palace. She is Divine Celia, the second daughter of Marquis Celia's family, who was worried because Verona had not contacted her for days and resolved to find out the details when meeting her today. While looking out the window, she glimpsed a carriage bearing the coat of arms of the Duchy of Roxelierne. She remembered hearing about a ball being held at the Duke's palace to celebrate the emergence of the new Duke. When the envoy entered, her father received him respectfully, expressing his appreciation for his coming personally to deliver the invitation. The envoy explained that he had come today, but the Duke himself wished to visit them personally at a later time. The Marquis agreed to meet at the ball, and at that moment the Marquis called Devine by her name. Her father ordered her to greet the envoy as was fitting. That guest was a knight from the Duchy of Roxelierne and was none other than Dominic in disguise. Later, in a lush garden, Devine was happily calling out to her friend Verona. When they met, Devine took her hand and asked why she hadn't contacted her, explaining she couldn't wait any longer, so she came to see her herself. Verona apologized to her friend Devine for the silence, explaining that some urgent matters had occupied her. Devine smiled and reassured her the matter did not warrant regret, but asked her to tell her next time, even with a simple word. Verona promised her that, thinking to herself that seeing Devine's smile brings peace to her heart, and remembered that this was the same reason that drove Dominic in the original novel to turn into a villain, out of a desire to possess her. While she was recalling that truth, she made sure she was right in her attempt to prevent Dominic and Devine from meeting. Verona commented that Devine was a little late and asked if something had happened. Devine told her that a knight from Duke Roxelierne's house had come to visit them, which sparked Verona's surprise. Devine explained he was delivering invitations to a ball and added admiringly that he was so handsome she thought he was the Duke himself, which pushed Verona to ask anxiously about his appearance. Devine described his appearance, saying he possessed black hair and sharp red eyes that could not be forgotten. Verona repeated to herself in shock, "Black hair and red eyes." Verona realized the truth, grabbed her friend, and asked eagerly if she had already met him. Devine answered in the affirmative while in a state of bewilderment and asked her if something was wrong, while features of extreme anxiety were etched on Verona's face. She became certain at that moment that the Imperial Guard was Dominic himself and realized his meeting with Devine would bring nothing but trouble. She asked Devine hesitantly if something specific had happened between them. She answered that only a brief conversation had taken place between them, but Devine surprised her that the conversation was about her, which struck Verona with amazement. Devine explained that when she told him she was her friend, he asked her about her, especially since he was headed to Count Rosentine's palace that evening. Verona asked her if this was all, wondering why he didn't ask anything about Devine herself. Devine confirmed they didn't even exchange looks directly, which made Verona feign a smile of relief, commenting that this seemed logical. Verona knew that Dominic's interest in Devine in the original novel began after the appearance of her holy marks, but she also realized that Devine was not devoid of interest in him even before that. Her becoming a saint was the greatest catalyst for that relationship. In the end, Devine's presence was captivating and could not be forgotten easily. Verona asked about the date of the ball in the Duke's palace. Devine answered it would be held after 2 weeks. Verona repeated the date anxiously. She remembered this ball was the place where Dominic and Devine met for the first time in the events of the original novel. She wondered in anxiety if things would truly change even if Dominic did not show any interest in Devine that night. Her thoughts were interrupted by Devine's voice asking her about the identity of the child who was hiding nearby. Verona told her it was her cousin Julian. Devine stepped toward him and introduced herself as Verona's friend. Julian could do nothing but return the greeting with shyness and confusion. Speaking of that, Verona turned toward Devine and asked her if her older brother was proficient in using the sword. Devine answered in the affirmative but with hesitation. Verona thought this was perfect. If he was from Devine's family, he was surely a trustworthy person, and revealed to her she was looking for a fencing tutor for Julian and asked her if her brother was willing to take on this task. But their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a servant to announce the arrival of a guest from Duke Roxelierne's house. Dominic appeared in his official uniform and offered greetings with a charming smile to Lady Verona Rosenthan, who stood in a state of bewilderment. Verona stammered while trying to process the situation, noting she was told he was from Duke Roxelierne's house. Devine innocently asked if Lord Jade and Verona knew each other. Verona hurried to deny the matter, asserting this was their first meeting. Verona commented to herself on the pseudonym he chose, then told Dominic she heard he was on his way here. Dominic explained his visit would not be long. Then he presented her with an official invitation, announcing that Duke Roxelierne would hold a ball and that it would be their pleasure if she would grace them with her presence to add joy and brilliance to the party. Verona smiled as she received the invitation, announcing her acceptance with gratitude. Verona asked if there was anything else, and Dominic told her he had overheard that she was looking for a fencing instructor. Verona confirmed his words, wondering why he was asking while Devine looked between them with curiosity. He surprised them by offering his services, sparking Verona's shock as she questioned why he would want that. He reminded her that he wished to return her kindness for helping him recently when he was lost on the road. Devine rejoiced at this revelation, excitedly commenting on how close they seemed to be, while Verona realized from her friend's look that she was trying to play matchmaker between her and Dominic. Verona tried to evade the situation, claiming she could not bother someone as busy as him. But Dominic denied it, asserting that there was no bother at all, and that he had plenty of time thanks to the generosity of his master, the Duke. Verona replied sarcastically that he seemed to have a very generous master, and he agreed with a smile. Davine whispered in her friend's ear, hinting that Julian might just be an excuse, and that Jade might be interested in her, encouraging her to give him a chance. But Verona tried to deny it. Julian appeared behind them and asked Verona if the Duke's bodyguard would become his private fencing instructor. At that moment, Verona remembered that Julian's father was also a knight, Dominic, approached Julian and offered to evaluate his basic stance immediately if Verona allowed it. Julian asked eagerly if he was serious. Verona sighed in surrender as she saw the enthusiasm in Julian's eyes. She allowed him to proceed and show what he had. Julian thanked her enthusiastically and rushed off to get a wooden sword. While Dominic waited, Verona told Davine she would speak with her father about the matter. Dominic asked her if he should set a daily time for their visits. Verona agreed to this, explaining that this arrangement was fine anyway, as it would only last until his true identity was revealed, while the other replied that he looked forward to working with her. Elsewhere, inside the Holy Temple, Louis was praying devoutly. As he stood up, his memory recalled Verona's words, and he hoped they would meet again someday. However, he felt that his meeting with that mysterious man was an ill omen and that he should not get more involved with him. As he was about to leave, he noticed a spot on the ground. When he examined it closely, he realized in shock that what he saw were traces of black magic. At that moment, a priest arrived and called for the high priest to come. Louis asked the high priest to take a look, and he confirmed that these were indeed traces of black magic. The priest expressed his resentment at the audacity of the attackers in desecrating the Holy Temple. Louis asked him if such an incident had occurred before. The high priest told him that reports of dark wizards appearing throughout the empire had risen significantly recently, and it would not be long before this news spread to the capital, revealing the disappearance of one of the temple's holy relics. He concluded from this that they must be planning something. He ordered Louis to begin investigating the matter tomorrow to uncover the identity of the dark wizard hiding like a rat and to pull him out by his roots. He assured him that this matter concerned the pride of the temple. Louis responded to the order with calmness and seriousness. 3 days after the investigation began, Louis was examining the evidence and discovered a common feature among all the missing holy relics. They were all items of no particular importance to the temple, and at the same time, had no material value if sold in the market. Among them was a necklace that reveals the degree of soul corruption, which made him wonder about the identity of the thief. He wondered why dark wizards would use magic to steal such trivial things. Louis felt there was something strange about the case, as these stolen goods provided them with no real benefit. A troubling possibility occurred to him. What happened might not be the work of dark wizards at all. At that moment, he felt the presence of someone near him, so he turned quickly and shouted, questioning their identity. The disguised person ran trying to escape, and Louis demanded they stop. But the person continued running, forcing Louis to chase them through the temple corridors. Suddenly, the intruder vanished from sight, leaving Louis bewildered as to how they could disappear so quickly. He is struck with shock when he sees a lifeless body before him. At Rosenton Palace, Julian was training hard at fencing, panting from exhaustion. Dominic commented admiringly on his skill, noting that it was amazing that he could master the art of fencing like this in just 3 days. Julian laughed and asked him if he truly meant it. Verona was watching them from afar, wondering to herself what plan Dominic was concocting this time. Her thoughts were interrupted by a servant who came to tell her there was a visitor. Verona was surprised, as she was not expecting anyone. The visitor was Louis, who had come without warning. Verona asked him about his sudden appearance, and he told her it had been a long time, and wondered how she had been since their last meeting. She answered that she was fine, but admitted in secret that much had already happened, then asked him why he was standing outside instead of coming in. Louis told her seriously that a black wizard had appeared in the capital. He explained that his identity had not yet been determined, but since a body had been found with traces of black magic, he came to warn her and ask her to be cautious at this time. Verona thanked him for his concern. He told her that he would return now to continue his investigations and promised he would visit her again. While she watched him leave, she was thinking about the news he brought, the discovery of a body affected by black magic. Dominic appeared beside her, coldly commenting on the absurdity of the matter. She asked him suspiciously if he had a hand in what happened. He denied it, questioning what benefit he might gain from such an act. But he added that a certain person came to his mind. Verona asked him about the identity of this person. He told her it was his master who taught him black magic. While he was thinking about the matter, Verona interrupted him, wondering what was wrong with him. Dominic confronted her, questioning why she was pretending to be ignorant about the recent incident, as long as she possessed the ability to see the future. She was struck with surprise, and confusion was clear on her features. Verona tried to justify her position in confusion, explaining that her ability is limited and does not allow her to see the entire future. Otherwise, she would have become a saint point by now. Then she tried to change the subject, reminding him that Julian was waiting for her and that they should hurry back, and she turned to leave, leaving him lost in his thoughts. The scene then shifted to the palace of Duke Roxelierne, where Dominic was sitting alone. His mind was occupied with Verona, as he found it very strange that she was not aware of such a simple matter. He remembered how she knew about the ring he inherited from his mother, which increased his bewilderment and made him wonder why she would hide the truth of her ability. Meanwhile, a woman appeared before him in the form of Verona. Dominic mockingly commented that she looked like a real person despite being just an illusion. Dominic asked the woman what she wanted this time. The woman warned him that he would regret his actions, but Dominic ignored her warning, expressing his resentment at her talk filled with riddles, and demanded she speak in a way he could understand. Then the woman sharply questioned why he was trying to kill himself. Dominic told her. He did not understand what she meant, but she replied by questioning what prevented him from doing so. In a moment, Dominic found himself in a strange place and saw another version of himself standing before him. He found himself talking with Verona about the error of using the power granted to him to get what he wanted. He wondered in shock if that was himself. He realized that what he saw was an illusion, but before he could process it, that double had already moved. Dominic wondered if he had entered some kind of imagination. He tried to convince himself that everything he saw was just an illusion, but he felt a strange and familiar sensation at the same time. This mysterious illusion continued for several days. In that imagination, he found himself extremely interested in Verona. He was pursuing her sad blue eyes, repeatedly trying to catch her attention. In one instance, he told her he wanted all of her for himself, but she replied coldly that this was a goal he would never be able to achieve in this life. She smiled a faint smile, asserting that there must be some impossible things in this world. He was longing for a woman he could not have, marveling at her confident words and her fearless gaze. Then one day, he realized that he actually felt the same way about her. He wondered if he was connected to his version in the illusion, and about the nature of the relationship that bound them, and if that version represented his future. But he soon wondered if that was not his future. Could it be his past? Then he saw another scene, where he was facing Verona, who looked exhausted. He asked her if she would give up this easily. She answered him that she was already tired, and he wondered in shock what she was doing. She told him clearly that she was trying to escape. Then she grabbed his sword and stabbed herself with it, asking him to wait for her in the next life, and that at that time she would make sure not to lose this easily. Dominic screamed her name in pain and horror. Then he woke up from the illusion panting, wondering if what happened was real. He recalled her last words while laughing mockingly, commenting on the absurdity of the idea that life can start anew. At that moment, a horrific idea occurred to him. What if Verona was not seeing the future, but the past that had already happened? And what if she was none other than a person living the same life over and over again from scratch?